In China, it's no surprise that every phone call you make and every text message you send is monitored. You might think that after going through all the trouble to come to the United States, you'd be safe, or at least free from CCP surveillance. You're wrong. In December 2024, the FBI publicly warned all Americans to immediately stop using standard phone calls and text messages and switch to end-to-end encrypted messaging apps. What does this mean? It means that America's largest telecom giants, AT&T, Verizon, and Lumen, have all been compromised. Even the phone of J.D. Vance, who was running for vice president at the time, was being monitored in real time. Everyone originally thought this was just an isolated hacking incident until a few days ago on August 4th, 2026, when the U.S. Congress released a 49-page report that shocked Washington. Only then did everyone suddenly realize that the enemy didn't even need to pick the lock because Americans had opened the door themselves. And those enemies who were supposedly long ago deported had in fact never left for a single day. What exactly happened? How could America's telecommunications network be infiltrated to this extent? Hello everyone, this is Weiyu Looks at the World, and I am Chen Weiyu. Today, let's take a look at this jaw-dropping telecommunications Trojan horse case. Between 2019 and 2022, the U.S. Federal Communications Commission, or FCC, carried out a series of swift and iron-fisted actions, successively canceling and revoking the operating licenses of 3 Chinese companies in the United States: China Mobile International, China Telecom Americas, and China Unicom Americas. The reason is that all 3 are state-owned enterprises of the CCP. Their parent companies are in China, and in China, no company can truly refuse the demands of the Chinese government. Therefore, as long as they remain in the U.S. telecommunications network, there is a risk that Americans' calls, text messages, and internet browsing records could be accessed. This story made the news back then, and the headlines were generally something like this: U.S. officially kicks the 3 major Chinese telecom companies out of the U.S. market. Everyone felt relieved seeing this, thinking the bad guys had been caught, the referee had blown the whistle, and the bad guys had been kicked off the field. But everyone was fooled, including the media at the time, and including you and me. It wasn't until a few days ago, on August 4th, 2026, that the U.S. House Select Committee on the Strategic Competition between the United States and the Chinese Communist Party, which specifically monitors the CCP, released a 49-page report. This report was signed by both parties. Republican Chairman Molinar and Democratic Ranking Member Khanna signed the report side by side. In today's Washington, where everything is at odds, for the 2 parties to be able to reach a consensus, it shows that the situation has reached a very serious point. The title of this report is The Strange Signal. The report reveals an absurd truth. The FCC only revoked the licenses, but not a single piece of equipment has been removed. Do you know how this report was put together? The Select Committee on the CCP initially asked these 3 telecom companies to explain themselves, but all 3 refused to cooperate. So the committee issued subpoenas, forced them to come in, conducted formal interviews with transcripts, and investigated for a total of 18 months. And the first thing they uncovered was that the FCC only revoked the licenses, not the equipment. What does that mean? Let me give you an analogy. Suppose a restaurant is ordered by the health department to shut down today. The sign is taken down and they can no longer sell food, but no one mandates that they must remove all the refrigerators, stoves, and gas lines from the kitchen. They are still renting the space, they still have the keys, and the equipment is powered on and running as usual every day. They just aren't open for business. This is pretty much the situation that the U.S. Congress has discovered this time. After the licenses of the U.S. subsidiaries of those 3 Chinese telecom companies were revoked, they didn't withdraw from the U.S. Their servers, routers, and switching equipment are still sitting in third-party data centers in the U.S. They are still renting rack space, still paying electricity bills, and still maintaining interconnection with U.S. networks. More importantly, only certain basic telecommunication services were prohibited. As for services like enterprise private networks, internet transit, and remote management, they were not explicitly prohibited by law. Consequently, the report reached a serious conclusion. These U.S. subsidiaries have never truly severed ties with their parent companies in China and Hong Kong. To this day, they remain embedded in U.S. infrastructure, posing a risk to every U.S. network user. By the way, let me mention a detail that Chairman Molinar specifically pointed out. He said that these companies, while doing business in the U.S., would require American clients to sign commitments to censor information content in accordance with the laws of the Chinese Communist Party. Isn't that ridiculous? This is why, even when you use a U.S. telecom company's phone service in the United States, it's possible for you to be monitored by the CCP. So, if a company has already been determined to pose a national security risk, and its equipment remains at the heart of the U.S. network, what exactly can it do? Before answering this question, I need to spend 2 minutes talking about a secret that has been hidden behind the internet for 37 years. BGP, the Border Gateway Protocol. Did you know? The internet has a huge secret. It has no traffic control center, and there is no supercomputer sitting in the middle telling your data where to go. Tens of thousands of networks around the world rely on shouting at each other to determine their routes. One network shouts, "I have a segment of addresses here, so it's fastest to go through me." When the neighboring networks hear this, they pass their data to it and then relay that message to even more distant networks. By passing it along layer by layer like this, the map of routes for the entire world is drawn. And this set of shouting rules is called BGP, the Border Gateway Protocol. And a fatal weakness in the design of BGP is that it doesn't verify authenticity. If you say who you are, others believe you. If you say that a certain range of addresses is under your control, the whole world will send data there. There is no identity verification, no digital signatures, and no cross-checking. A report from the U.S. Congress used a great analogy. It's like anyone being able to put up their own detour sign on a highway. You're driving along, you see a sign that says, "Road work ahead, please detour here," so you turn. You wouldn't stop to ask who put that sign up. And once the data is diverted onto a certain path, it can be copied, recorded, monitored, or even altered, and then sent back to its original destination. The recipient opens it up and thinks, "Oh, the content's all there, the timing's about right," completely unaware that it actually just traveled halfway around the world. Let's take an example. In 2008, Pakistan Telecom wanted to block YouTube within their country, so their technicians performed a very simple action. They broadcasted to the outside world that they were in charge of that specific YouTube address, intending to intercept the domestic traffic. As it turned out, once that message went out, the entire global internet believed it. For the next 2 hours or so, no one around the world could access YouTube. You see, one engineer, one setting, one message, that was all it took to wipe the world's largest video platform off the face of the earth for 2 hours. And where did this set of rules that affects billions of people around the world come from? That brings us to the 2 napkin agreements, which we'll discuss in detail later. First, a quick word from our sponsor. Thanks to our show's sponsor, the Jeju Island Red Sea Cucumber Health Gel from South Korea. This Jeju Island Red Sea Cucumber Health Gel is one of our most popular products right now, and it often sells out. Why is it so often in such high demand? First, it's hand-harvested by the Hanyo divers of Jeju Island, South Korea, because the yield of these wild Red Sea cucumbers is truly very limited. The second reason is that the repurchase rate is incredibly high. Many of our viewers take it with their whole family. If you often feel fatigued, have trouble sleeping, or lack energy, these are often signs of long-term physical depletion. Red sea cucumber is rich in sea cucumber saponins, sea cucumber polysaccharides, and collagen, which can help our bodies gradually restore their vitality. We can show you some feedback from our viewers. Some say that improved sleep is a given, 1 a night, and they sleep soundly until morning. Others have shared that they fall asleep as soon as they hit the bed, their bowel movements are regular, and issues like knee pain and fatty liver have cleared up. Some viewers even mentioned that after just 1 month of eating it, their 20-year-old foot cramps were gone. Yesterday, another viewer left a comment telling us that they started taking it in June and feel fantastic. The pressure on their knees is gone, they can move freely, and they're definitely going to keep taking it long term. Of course, these are personal experiences, and results will vary from person to person. I want to remind everyone that the Red Sea Cucumber Health Jelly is a high-quality health supplement, not a medicine. If you're in need, you should really give it a try. Click the link below our program and enter my promo code WEIU to enjoy a 15% discount. Back to the main topic, in January 1989, at a lunch table during a tech conference in Austin, Texas, two engineers, one from IBM and one from Cisco, met. Cisco is that company that helped the CCP build this network surveillance system. As they chatted, they casually picked up two napkins from the table and sketched out this set of rules. Later on, this set of rules became known as the Two-Napkin Agreement. Today, billions of people around the world and billions of dollars in business are all using this set of rules. Back in 1989, the only ones who could connect to the internet were a few universities and research institutions. Everyone knew each other, and many had even met in person. In that world, there was no need to be on guard against anyone. So these two engineers made an assumption that was perfectly reasonable at the time, that no one would lie. But they could never have imagined that 37 years later, this assumption of trust would become the biggest backdoor for the CCP's intelligence agencies. At this point, you might say, since anyone can put up these fake road signs, China could just broadcast the information too. They don't necessarily need to place equipment in American server rooms, right? Actually, that's not the case. Why would they need to place equipment in American server rooms? The answer is simple. Let's use the road sign analogy again. First of all, the sign has to be placed at the intersection for cars to actually turn. You can make a fake road sign anywhere, but the question is, where do you put it? If you put a sign up in another country 1,000 kilometers away, who's gonna see it? No one is gonna change their route for a sign that far away. Everyone will just keep taking the original road. But if you place the sign at the intersection right outside someone's front door, they'll see it as soon as they pull out, and of course they'll turn. So if China Mobile's equipment is placed in a server room in the US, that's exactly what it's doing, moving that sign from China 1,000 kilometers away to an intersection in the US. Secondly, the road that this fake sign points to has to actually lead back to the right place. If a car is guided by your fake road sign, there are two possibilities. First, it might be a dead end. The car drives in, can't get out, and the driver realizes they've been tricked within 30 seconds and will turn around to call the police. In terms of the internet, this is called a connection failure. Your web page won't load, your call won't go through, and someone will notice immediately and come to investigate. The second possibility is that the road takes a small detour and leads back to where you were originally going. In that case, the driver will just think, why is there a bit of traffic today, and still arrive home on time? They will never know in their entire life that they were detoured, and during that detour, whatever the car was carrying, wherever it was going, and whoever it was meeting, everything was copied. Think about it. If that detour went from Los Angeles to Beijing and then back to New York, the driver would know something was wrong in less than 30 seconds because the time difference would be too huge. But if it's just taken a couple of extra blocks in the city, no one would ever notice. Those machines left in the server rooms in the US are doing exactly that. They make your detour short enough that you won't even realize it. In 2018, the US Naval War College conducted a study to count exactly how many landing points China Telecom had in North America. Do you know how many there were? 10? 8 in the US and 2 in Canada, and all of them were positioned at critical exchange points. The study documented several real-life cases. In 2016, data from a major British American bank was sent from the US to its headquarters in Milan, but as it turned out, it was routed to China instead. In 2017, data being sent from Northern Europe to Japan that passed through the US was also intercepted. The study concluded that these data were copied for analysis and then forwarded to their original destination, just with a slight delay. It was only a slight delay, so no one noticed at all. Often, they don't even need to put up a sign. What the FCC banned were certain basic telecommunications services, but there is one business that wasn't banned, called Internet Transit. What is transit? To put it simply, it's helping others upload data. That means a portion of US data was already passing through their hands openly every day. There was no need to deceive anyone or reroute it. What the US Congress did this time, frankly speaking, was a clumsy method, but it was very powerful. They went through all the global network routing records from January 2018 to mid-May 2025, a total of over 7 years. What they were looking for were those records of fake signposts, which networks related to China or Hong Kong had, without authorization, publicly claimed to control U.S. network locations. Over 7 years, they counted nearly 109,000 instances. Those 109,000 fake signposts might not all be intentional acts by the CCP, you know? Some could just be configuration errors or poor network management. But right now, the US has no way to distinguish between what's infiltration and what's a mistake. Among these, at least 477 US networks were affected. This includes major telecommunications carriers, Fortune 500 companies, and operators of critical infrastructure, spanning power, transportation, and finance sectors. Among them, networks controlled by China Mobile alone were involved in over 4,200 instances. I know that if I keep throwing these numbers at you, you'll eventually become numb to them. So let's put it another way. Over the past 7 years, on average, every 30 minutes, someone has been announcing to the whole world, hey, this particular segment of the US network is under my control. And in the vast majority of cases, no one notices, no one raises an alarm, there's no disconnection, and not a single computer pops up to warn you. Your calls still go through, your emails still get delivered, and everything seems perfectly normal. It's just that the route might have taken a detour in the middle. So, what exactly are the consequences of these detours? There's a set of numbers in this report that will shock you when you see them. U.S. congressional investigators found that between September 22nd and 25th, 2024, in just 4 short days, China Mobile International's network experienced 192 abnormal routing incidents, pointing to 58 sets of servers. The mastermind behind these servers is the group codenamed Salt Typhoon, which has ties to China's Ministry of State Security and is described by the U.S. intelligence community as the culprit behind the most severe telecommunications breach in history. So what did Salt Typhoon do? They infiltrated the systems of some of the largest telecommunications companies in the United States, AT&T, Verizon, and Lumen. If you're not familiar with these names, just know that when Americans make calls, send texts, or transmit messages, these signals basically all pass through them. At first, officials said about 8 telecom companies were hit, but later the number rose to 9. And the White House official in charge of cybersecurity at the time said something very candid and also quite alarming at a press conference. He said, "We actually don't know the full scope yet." What they took included metadata for over 1 million people. That is, who called whom, when they called, how long they talked, and where they were at the time. All of this information was taken. And for specific targets, what they obtained wasn't just records. It was the actual, real-time, unencrypted content of calls and text messages. So, who were these specific targets? This list was at the heart of the 2024 U.S. election, including then-presidential candidate Trump, his running mate Vance, staff from Vice President Harris's campaign team, and Senate Democratic leader Schumer. The Salt Typhoon servers were most active in late September 2024, while the U.S. presidential election day was November 5th, 2024. In other words, during those 6 weeks, the mobile phones of the most critical figures in the United States were being wiretapped by the CCP. You think that's shocking enough, right? But that's not all. There's something even more absurd. And speaking of which, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank everyone who has donated to our one-click VPN project. To date, over 2,000 friends have generously extended a helping hand, allowing more than 10 million people in China to see the real world for the first time. To thank those who support our one-click firewall bypass project, starting now, if you donate $150 or more, we'll send you a hardcover copy of The Naked Communist plus the audiobook. And for donations of $300 or more, we'll add an ebook as a bonus. Friends in China can access the ebook for free via the one-click firewall bypass link. We hope more of you will help Chinese people bypass the firewall. I will post the donation link below the video. Thank you all for your support. In 1994, during President Clinton's term, the U.S. Congress passed a law called CALIA. The content of this law is quite simple. All telecommunications companies must reserve a lawful interception channel within their networks. This way, when the FBI obtains a court order to wiretap a drug dealer, a terrorist, or a spy, they can just plug right in. The logic back then was quite sound. They said it was a necessary tool for catching bad guys. There were people who opposed it at the time because those in the tech community argued that if you open a door for the good guys, the bad guys can walk through it just the same because this door doesn't discriminate. However, nobody really cared about that at the time. 30 years later, Salt Typhoon followed the network channels left behind by companies like China Mobile and slipped directly into this CALA wiretapping system that was built specifically for the FBI. And how long were they in there? Investigators say it was for months or even years. What did they get their hands on while they were in there? They obtained an almost complete list. A list of all the phone numbers the FBI was wiretapping at the time. What does this mean? It means that if U.S. counterintelligence agencies were targeting a CCP sleeper agent, that agent could simply check the list to see if their cover had been blown. Decades of leads accumulated by the U.S. intelligence community became transparent in an instant. When even the FBI is helpless, what are we supposed to do? In December 2024, the FBI and the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, issued a joint public advisory to all Americans. The advice was to stop using regular phone calls and switch to end-to-end encrypted software instead. After reflecting on the painful lessons learned, the U.S. side finally prescribed a drastic remedy. The House report put forward 6 recommendations. I won't read them to you one by one, but I'll pick the one that paints the most vivid picture. The 4th one is called Rip and Replace, which means physically removing those high-risk Chinese-funded equipment from U.S. data centers and replacing them with something else. On April 30th, 2026, the FCC unanimously passed a new draft rule with a 3-0 vote, preparing to directly prohibit China Mobile, China Telecom, and China Unicom from operating data centers and network access points in the USA, while also banning U.S. telecom carriers from interconnecting with companies on the restricted list. And after this House report came out, the FCC has been stepping up the drafting of another order, intending to ban U.S. data centers from using Chinese-made network equipment and components, even including parts as small as a fingernail, like optical modules. The U.S. only started to wake up slowly after being hit by the iron fist of the CCP. The greatest weakness of the free world is our openness and trust. And what the CCP is best at is exploiting this trust, turning our own rules into weapons to use against us. Although this profound cyber awakening has come at a heavy price, it is not too late. Alright, that's all for our program today. The truth revealed in this report concerns the privacy and security of every one of us. If you find this content valuable, please help us by liking and sharing. I'm Layu. See you next time.